Hello and welcome to BCP, Being Crisis Prepared, a business continuity podcast from Inveroy Crisis Management. Recorded today in Erbil, the capital of Kurdistan in northern Iraq. As we've done over the last few podcasts, we're going to start with a look at a couple of news items. And I'm going to start with a news item about farming, and Toby's then going to look at something about robotics. And we'll then move on to cover two items in more detail. Firstly, national infrastructure, and then AI. So that's the look forward. So, Goldsmiths. Goldsmiths University in London recently announced that they were serious about climate emergency management, and they were going to take beef and beef burgers off the menu, amongst many other things that they were going to do, which was quite headline grabbing as a statement. But what does that mean for a bit of horizon scanning for farmers if the world is starting to look at alternatives to high intensity environmental impact activities such as eating beef? And we say it's high intensity because beef produces methane, damaging gas to the environment. It takes up a lot of space to rear cows compared to other alternatives such as chicken, sheep, and so on. And obviously the increasing awareness of these issues encourages people to go vegetarian or vegan as part of that drive as well. When you then look at the impact that vegan sausage rolls had for Greggs and the take-up of that, and link it to the increased use of non-dairy milk, so oat milk, almond milk, and so on, the poor farmer is being put under considerable pressure. And the question there, perhaps, that struck me from a resilience point of view is something that we often don't do as resilience and crisis professionals, is horizon scanning to any degree of depth. But the horizon for a farmer producing milk, producing beef, is starting to narrow quite quickly already. And therefore, the sort of so what in my mind was, if you are a farmer and your market is starting to shrink, what are the options? How might you diversify, or how might you specialize so that you keep your market, you keep that for those of us in the UK, the amazing countryside that we all love and enjoy is there because the farmers care for it, because they need it to use their cattle. And although it's a small example from Goldsmiths, is that the start of a trend that could see the UK fundamentally change in 50 years' time from where it is now, and farmers being paid to manage the land rather than manage a flock of cows, a herd of cows, a flock of sheep on the land, which is obviously a completely different skill set that might be required for the two. So not necessarily giving any answers, but it certainly starts to get you questioning when you see related articles coming in the news and you start, hang on a second, how does that interact? What might the future lead? And the skill from horizon scanning is to get an expert, or better still, a panel of experts to start to look at the different overlapping areas. So farming, is it the leisure industry that you need a specialist in? Is it law? Is it contracts and relationships with Europe, and where can you get money from to support you? It is no longer just good enough to say, I'm a good farmer, I'm going to be okay. You have to have a team, create your virtual board that you can rely on and get information and listen to their perspective so that you come to a position of what does the future look like for me. And it doesn't matter, yes, farming is an example, but every industry would be the same. Spot the trend before it comes rather than being reactive to it afterwards, and then you're chasing to catch up with your competitors. So that was Goldsmiths and the issue of meat and farmers. Toby.
Thank you, Matthew. And to quote the incomparable Richie Beno, good afternoon, Matthew. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure that Richie Beno actually ever spoke to Matthew, but you get my point. And
he didn't. But...
greetings to everybody from Kurdistan, a wonderful region where Matthew and I have been immaculately looked after. And the news article that caught my eye this week was a case study on digital technologies in the oil and gas industry. We've been working with a number of energy companies whilst we've been out here, doing a variety of tasks, preparing them for crises and emergencies, and also doing some horizon scanning. So this one was of interest to me, and it's robotics, which are often referred to in the offshore oil and gas industry as the fourth subsea revolution. And the way that this transpires, the way this plays out, is autonomous offshore robots, which have multiple sensors on them, visual and thermal cameras, gas detection, microphones, working in pairs to complete autonomous tasks, docking themselves when they're low on power, and using AI and machine learning to understand the platform that they're working on. And they can perform routine tasks, but also some non-routine ones, such as searching very efficiently in a rescue situation. And obviously the same can be done by airborne drones, either on a land-based platform or indeed around a sea-based piece of energy infrastructure. So these were trialed last year. Total used one called Argonaut, and they believe that with some more development, it can significantly improve safety, reduce costs, and prolong the life of many of the North Sea fields. And so this is a great example of looking at technology in a horizon scanning way, because if you're looking at what the future holds and preparing yourself to take advantage of it, rather than waiting for it to arrive and then trying to catch up with the rest of the industry, it places you in a much better, more resilient position. And as you can imagine, if you can get a drone to do a task that formerly required a diver subsurface or a helicopter in the air or somebody going to a dangerous part of the rig, it is significantly safer and therefore significantly more resilient. So that technology theme is one I'll return to later.
And I think it's really interesting that there's that's a subsurface example, but actually a lot of platforms now use drones, and there's an Edinburgh-based one, I think it's called Cyberhawk, company that does great work in reducing risk as well as costs, able to work longer hours, able to get to parts that a person cannot get to above infrastructure. So again, that using technology to make you more resilient and also make your platform spot those weaknesses before they break, so that you can change out the part and continue production, is obviously absolutely critical when you're dealing with a very highly flammable and dangerous hydrocarbons. But any process, you need to be able to keep it going. I think it's the Japanese philosophy of changing out things and fixing things, Kaizen, continuous improvement, so that you are more resilient and better at what you do, so that you're more competitive and you're a better business. Simple.
Yes, and we either call that Japanese Kaizen or we call it Trigger's new broom. 4 new handles and 3 new heads, but it's the same broom after 20 years. But Trigger wasn't as dumb as he looked.
Yep, and absolutely brilliant classic UK comedy as well. So there's a couple of things that we've picked up in the news, and we could have picked probably 20 or 30 different categories in this last month that we've been looking at, because there are so many examples almost on a daily basis. If you look at the news of a emergency response or a crisis, and you look around the world, you've protests in Hong Kong, you've got typhoons in China. It is not difficult to spot the issues, and we are purposefully steering away at the moment from where are we going with no deal, etc., because clearly that is the ultimate in resilience and disruption potential at the moment. So there's a lot out there, and as a professional we should be alive to it and looking for it for case studies that we can then bring to our own area of business and learn from them. One of the things that we did pick up on the news and we wanted to spend a little bit longer on was the whole issue of the fantastic emergency response that the joint service and agencies did in the UK for the Toddbrook Reservoir. So if you're unfamiliar with this, please do Google Todbrok reservoir, which is in the UK in Derbyshire. And a few weeks ago, water was cascading over the front of the reservoir situated just above Whaley Bridge in Derbyshire, as I say, to such an extent that part of the front started to collapse, and there was a real risk of the whole reservoir collapsing and washing into a residential area. When you're faced with that circumstance and you made that decision that this is serious, you have to have a plan. And as an example, the residents were told to evacuate and just go, and the whole village was then locked down, no one allowed in. So if you were away shopping or at work, you came back and your house was under significant risk of being washed away if the dam collapsed. Now, in your house, you've got everything from your passports to your loved ones' possessions, photograph albums, everything is now at risk. So the risk to those individuals, something in the order of, I think, 1,500 people evacuated at short notice to local schools, local places to stay. Amazing performance by the whole village and surrounding areas. And the emergency services to make it happen in a way that kept people safe, kept people's sense of humour, that they were doing a job to the best of their ability in trying circumstances, and then the combined effort to lower the height of the water in the dam as rapidly as possible to remove the pressure from it and get to a stage that it was no longer a risk, residents could return, and an assessment could be made of the reservoir. Absolutely phenomenal. Royal Air Force flying in, I think it was 500 tons of aggregate to plug the hole and re-support it. Brilliant. So we see that and we think, oh, does that mean that all dams are naturally dangerous and volatile? Well, this particular reservoir, 1830s it was constructed, so it's nearly 200 years old. And it brings me back to a topic that I have touched on before, of our ageing UK infrastructure, and the UK will be no different to any other country, that we built things a long time ago, sewage systems, road systems, rail systems, that all are now very old. And unless we are able to observe it, maintain it, it is going to need changing out, just as we talked about earlier about drones identifying things and changing things before they break. How do you change a dam and empty the reservoir, remove the old infrastructure, rebuild it, refill it in a way that is cost efficient and going to equal your value for money in that operation? It is a massive subject. When you then talk about railway lines being washed away because of the rain effect, whether that be in the Highlands of Scotland or down in Devon and Dorset, it happens a lot. Roads are much more used than they were originally built for, crumbling in areas, potholes, etc. It starts to create that image or that awareness that we as a country are vulnerable from a resilience point of view because our infrastructure may not be able to cope with the way that we're using it and the way that we're maintaining it. And if we're not willing to take the hit that we've got to shut it down and the cost that it's going to involve, then it's only going to spiral down. It's not going to suddenly fix itself. We can inspect things as much as we like, but unless you actually pick up the responsibility of fixing it, it's going to leave for our children, our grandchildren, much worse environment, and our productivity goes down because we can't move things as quickly as we could because the railway line's broken, because the sewage is backing up, etc. Sorry, Toby, you were going to say?
Yeah, if I can come in on there, Matthew, I think it's really important to understand that not only are these problems not going away, they are getting worse. So if you take the example of a dam, which might provide you with water, it might provide you with power. The situation is that world energy demand is expected to grow, and these are quite scary figures, by between 10 and 35% between now and 2060. So over a third more power required, while some of us are still going to be alive, and obviously our children will. Electricity demands are going to grow much more than that, with increased urbanization and technological advances such as electric cars. So if your dam or any power generation infrastructure is going to be required to produce more than it is doing now in the future, if we are to lead the life that we envisage. And by 2050, so the same timescale, the world demand for water is scheduled to increase 20 to 30%. Matthew's just getting up to answer the door, which was an unexpected ring, but there we go, I'll keep talking, to an annual consumption of 5 million cubic kilometres. The amount of water needed to irrigate crops is likely to increase by 40%, and the manufacturing sector's demand for water within our lifetimes could be 400% higher than it is now. Pollution and extraction are going to remain the significant problems that they are at the moment, unless you bring in controlled extraction and much, much better pollution control. Some countries cannot operate and maintain their current systems or invest in new ones, and groundwater currently provides drinking water to at least 50% of the world's population, whilst 1/3 of the Earth's large aquifers are being drained at an unsustainable rate, and glaciers are melting. So we're going to need more power, we're going to need more water, and in the UK, the infrastructure to provide both is creaking.
And I think the other news item that happened in the recent past was the power outage in London, the southeast and east coast, as a result of a double failure of the power generation system. So it starts to build that picture of, can we rely on the infrastructure that we've had? And from a personal resilience point of view, what does that mean both for you as individuals, but for you as businesses? And we're in Kurdistan at the moment, and we were talking to a client just a couple of days ago and said, actually, in the UK, you expect something to work and you're surprised when it doesn't, and therefore you're not prepared. In Kurdistan, they've had so many knocks over the decades that they expect something not to work and are pleasantly surprised when it does. So every house has a backup generator. The power goes off half a dozen times every day. No one bats an eyelid. Whereas in the UK, the power goes off, even for 40 minutes, it's a national outrage and national newspapers. But I just finished this thought on going back to the residents of Whaley Bridge. And when the dam had reached the point of it being an acceptable risk, the police allowed one member per household to go back into their house to collect anything they wanted, but they had 15 minutes to do it. And I just wonder, as an audience, if you had 15 minutes and you can think about it beforehand, and right, I'm going to get there, I've got 15 minutes to fill my car with everything that I think is important, what would we actually go for? And certainly if you're a small business working from home or working from an office, you might grab the laptop and hope that everything is on the cloud, and that's good. But if it's your house, is it your children's toys that you go for, or that memento from an exotic holiday in Skegness, or your passports,
the cat?
The cat. It is quite a difficult thing to do, and it made me think. We all spend an absolute fortune on house insurance, but what is it in your house that you really want? And if you were told to start again and you've got 15 minutes at a boot of the car to fill it, what would you do? What do you really hold valuable? And so from that personal resilience point of view, if we know that's what we hold valuable, then when you're thinking about your own resilience in your home, where is it? How easy is it get to? So that if there is a fire and the fire alarm goes off, and the smoke alarm rather goes off in your house, can I find the wedding album from 30 years ago that I want to keep, because I can't replace it? I can replace the CDs and the videos and so on, but I can't. What is it that you can't replace? Where is it? And if time permits and it's safe to do so, can I grab it on my way out? And it just struck me that's a thought that might be worth considering. Personal resilience, personal, if you like, grab bag. And I'm not suggesting you have a bag ready to go all the time, but if your things are in 4 or 5 different locations, you stand no chance of doing it and getting out alive. So what can you find and what would you go for? So that's my little extended discussion around infrastructure. Over to you, Toby.
Thank you. And leading on from the point I made earlier about the increased demand in the next 30 to 40 years for electrical power, I've just realised that listening to it might have sounded a little bit like a doomsday scenario. And whilst I don't think it's immensely cheerful, because I think we've got some significant tasks ahead of us, I can perhaps throw a slightly kinder light on it by talking about some of the things that electrical power might be used for. And the one I'll focus on today is 5G enabled technology. So to give you the fastest gallop through history ever, 1G was analog voice, 2G was digital technology and the short messaging service, otherwise known as SMS or texts. 3G was the mobile internet, and 4G was the high-speed mobile broadband. When we move on to 5G, and this technology is starting to arrive next year and will, I think, spread quite rapidly, it will enable you to do things such as 360-degree video streaming, and compared to the present day, will enable you to download a film in something like 10 seconds, much lower latency rates, much higher bandwidth, etc. I now want to take you forward to not dystopian, but a version of the future. So when your life is enabled by 5G, the following sequence of events might well happen to you. Your alarm clock will have worked out for itself when to sound because it's looked at your electronic diary. When your alarm clock goes off and you yawn, your built-in music system starts to play the music that it knows you enjoy hearing in the morning, triggered by you yawning. Your medicine cabinet reminds you that you forgot to take your medication yesterday and lays out a pill for you. And your shower reacts to your alarm clock by turning itself on and getting to the required temperature. When you go into the bathroom, the health sensor detects some signs of an impending illness, flu, cold, etc., and it autonomously orders some over-the-counter medicine, which will be delivered to you by drone whilst you are out at work today. Or whilst you're out at work today, delivering a great presentation about, let's see, 5G, your telephone warns you that the cat has eaten all the cat food. So you use your telephone to release more cat food from the automatic feeder. And I'm going to take a slight pause here and say that if this actually happens, my cat has the ability to crash the entire national grid because she has got to be the greediest podmeister I've ever seen and never stops eating. Anyway, close brackets. Whilst you are out at work, your robotic machines cleaned your house, and having talked to your diary and knowing that you plan to have some people around for a barbecue, the house ordered more Budweiser, which again was delivered by drone. So that's a view of the future which isn't that far away. And
no, I think when you think we've already got automatic grass cutters, we've already got Amazon talking about delivering things by drone. And you made me smile there. I had in my mind the Wallace and Gromit image of Wallace creating his way of getting a cup of tea in the morning when he gets up, and it's very clunky, shall we say, but the process is there. And if 5G enables us to do that a little better, it's just joining the dots, isn't it? The dots are already beginning to materialize. And so it's that, how do you do it so it is commonplace to everybody? How exciting.
I think it will become part of everyday business probably before we, but without us really realizing. I think it's going to be evolution rather than revolution, albeit quite a fast evolution. And as 3G and 4G networks and support fall away, even the Luddites like me who say I'd really prefer not to live my life like that may find themselves doing so anyway, almost by osmosis. So if you want a comparator there, I would just ask how many people still use radio cassettes? Well, virtually nobody, because nobody sells them anymore. You can't buy the machines to play them. There's no support. And there's a better alternative called either iPods, iTunes, or CDs, which are a better alternative. That's the norm now. So I suspect 5G will become the norm. and we will end up having conversations with our house in much the same way that people do with Alexa these days.
Yeah,
Alexa, please remind me to call Matthew.
And you can have a security system that allows you to, through your phone, use your CCTV camera on the front gate. You can use your phone to order your Starbucks coffee. We are way, way more connected than we were even 5 years ago. And it's not that long ago, within the last 10 years, that the smartphone came along at all. So that leap in 10 years, where we now, anyone that doesn't have the technology at their hand to Google something, that information availability that in the last 10 years has just become commonplace. Where will we be in another 10 years, I guess, is the issue. And it's one thing we talk when we generate scenarios for emergency response exercises and so on. If you can think it can happen. And I remember talking to a client about security and talking about what would we do if a drone came and attacked the site, and a terrorist was flying in a drone with a device on it. Lo and behold, this week, Yemen terrorists have attacked a site in Saudi Arabia with 10 drones with explosives on them. So if you can think it can be done. And so in a technology point of view, if Toby and I as Luddites are thinking it, then there are going to already be clever brains out there making it into reality. The skill is, so what? What does this enable us as resilience professionals to make more resilient? And how do we do that? Any thoughts, Toby?
Well, one of the skills of horizon scanning is to weave the different threads together and to work out where they're going to cross, and therefore where they're going to produce a compounding effect. The standard threads are political, economic, sociological, technological, legislative, and environmental. And so I've looked at a technological bit of horizon scanning with 5G, leading on from Matthew's comments on the requirement for power. And if I now look at a sociological thread, which is the future workforce, you can see that it's going to cross with 5G because the future workforce is going to be using the future technology. So at some point in the future, again, same sort of timescale, 2050, your workforce is likely to be older because people will be living longer and probably retiring later. More of them will want to and will be able to work remotely, enabled probably by things like 5G. More of them will want to work as part of the gig economy, i.e. working when they choose to, not necessarily when you require them to. They will constantly require more education and courses because technology is going to be moving faster around them. You may well have more official genders than male and female. And so the point here is, with that changing workforce and the changing technology that we talked about, the smart employer is going to make themselves more resilient by starting to make themselves into an employer of choice. And that goes for a small business or a large multinational or public sector. So we would advise employers in terms of resilience to leverage 5G to create in the workspace a friendly community for older people. Make the environment one that they want to stay in. So work out what their needs are, what their desires are, and make sure that you meet as many of those needs as possible. So it can be things like, with isolation being an increasing problem for people of the third age, ensure that they meet as many other people as possible, they interact with as many other people as possible in the workplace. Things like an OAP's exercise class at lunchtime, any kind of other social interactions, perhaps make time within the working day, within the working environment, for people to learn skills that will entertain them, will energize them, will keep them wanting to come back. You may look at a premises where mobility scooters can be used inside. And what about a valued and valuable outdoor pursuit that engages a community workforce outside? So why not keep bees at work?
Yeah, I guess on the roof of a building, even in an urban area. And that helps then the whole challenge we have at the moment of loss of bees as well.
Absolutely. And all of these things can be enabled by the technology that will be available, so that you can automate some of the beekeeping tasks, but also involve people in them. And I think whenever you get a rapid march of technology, there is a widespread and understandable fear that it will take the jobs away. And whilst that is always partially true, the other half of the argument is it probably creates other types of jobs.
Yeah.
So as an employer or as a business, I think you'll be well advised to analyze how to get ahead of these technological and sociological changes so that you become an employer of choice.
And I guess, you focused on the aging element, but we've still got the importance of the younger element coming through, and how important they're going to be to support that, being recent graduates, recent school leavers with knowledge at their fingertips and able to take that forward with the older generation. Because time and time again, it's the youngster element of the population that knows how to do something. And clearly I am ancient, and therefore working out how the VHS recorder works.
The what?
Yeah, exactly. The video recorder was something that I could do and my parents couldn't do. And similarly now, my daughter is a black belt on all things technology. I listen to her and what she advises. Well, we need therefore to create. We need to create that learning environment and space where it doesn't matter how old you are. It's what skills you bring to that. And so, yes, you may still have your five-a-side football league, but you need to match that with something for the rest of your team, which could be gardening, it could be a book club. Those that are less active now because they may be in their 60s or 70s. How do we create that teamwork, that team spirit that makes you want to come to work and want to be part of that, if indeed we still go to work? Therefore, if we're not at work, we want to get together to share time, because of the loneliness of sat at your desk at home and not interacting with anybody. Well, that's not perhaps mentally good for you either. So no, really interesting. And was there anything else on that?
I think you're absolutely right, Matthew. To workers in high demand in future, not the only ones in high demand, but in high demand will be those with an advanced knowledge of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So a smart employer, smart business needs to work out quite soon how to recruit them and how to retain them. And they are going to cost money. They always do. People with niche skills, very important niche skills, but also create the environment that they want to come to work in, as Matthew mentioned. And for certain employers, it will be well worthwhile building an in-house AI knowledge bank. So what about putting on your young person's job spec the requirement to run courses for some of the other people in the workforce, so that your perhaps older workforce, loom smashers like Matthew and me, in coming to work, will gain an added benefit of being given some education that makes them more comfortable with a technological world which is changing quite fast around them. And therefore you're leveraging the expertise that you already have in your workforce for the benefit of the rest of it. And it's those sort of things that will make you more resilient and therefore allow you to survive the peaks and troughs of business much better in future.
Yeah, and anything that reduces staff churn means that you're not losing your intellectual property, you're not having to retrain people, and therefore your productivity goes up, you become more resilient. So great article, great thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes our podcast for this month. I hope that you found it informative and interesting. If there is anything that you want to send back to us, please do. Email is bcp@inveroy.com. Whether that's jargon that needs busting and explaining, whether that's a point that you'd like to bring up to correct something that we've said, please just tell us what it is and we will air it and discuss it. That's all for this month. Look forward to speaking to you again in September. Thanks very much.